When Stewart-Haas Racing recently announced that they'd be closing their doors at the end of the 2024 season, it shocked the entire industry. How could an organization with dozens of wins and 2 championships be shuttering less than 4 years from one of their most dominant seasons? But Stewart-Haas isn't the only championship caliber team to close suddenly. This has actually happened many times in recent NASCAR history for a multitude of different reasons. Perhaps the most successful team to collapse in a short amount of time was Junior Johnson and Associates. This legendary race team operated from 1953 to 1995, accumulating 132 victories and 6 championships. This team is largely the reason why the number 11 car is now the winningest number in NASCAR history, with legends like Bobby Allison, Cale Yarborough, Darrell Waltrip, Terry Labonte, and Bill Elliott all driving it at one point or another. But 1992, Bill Elliott's first year for the team, would be the dreaded turning point. The year started off amazingly, with Bill winning 4 of the first 5 races of the season and amassing a monumental points cushion. It all looked like smooth sailing for Bill until the Dover Fall race. Crew chief Tim Brewer went with a pit call that ultimately costed Bill 5 bonus points that ended up going to Alan Kulwicki. A small 10-point swing. But at this stage, Bill's points lead was still so massive that this shouldn't have been the major controversy it was. But this minor miscalculation ultimately led to Junior Johnson firing the best crew chief his organization had ever seen. In the weeks following Brewer's departure, Bill Elliott's season went into a tailspin with 4 finishes outside the top 25 in the last 6 races of the season. Before you knew it, Bill Elliott's incredible 300-point lead was wiped away in the blink of an eye, and Alan Kulwicki walked away with the title by, you guessed it, those all-important 10 points. This embarrassing defeat to Alan Kulwicki completely took the wind out of the team's sails for 1993, as they went winless for the first time in their long history. With 94 looking like more of the same, Bill Elliott decided to leave and form his own team at season's end, taking lucrative sponsor McDonald's with him, who was funding both him and teammate Jimmy Spencer's rides. Because of this, despite Mr. Excitement winning 2 races for the team that year, Johnson had to let him go at season's end. Anheuser-Busch also left the team at season's end to sponsor Ken Schrader and Hendrick Motorsports. Overnight, the team was down 2 star drivers and 2 of the sport's biggest sponsors. Johnson managed to temporarily fill the sponsorship gap by signing Lowe's to the team to fund Brett Bodine, but after an abysmal showing in 1995, Bodine would also leave the team and take Lowe's with him. It's worth noting that Brett Bodine was essentially running the husk of the team in 1995, as Junior Johnson stopped overseeing the team's day-to-day operations after the struggles of 1994. It's pretty insane to think that all of this basically stemmed from those 5 bonus points at Dover in 1992. 5 points that really shouldn't have mattered. But those 5 points got Brewer fired. They turned into 300 lost points and a lost championship. The team declined, the drivers left, the sponsors left, and eventually the snowball was too overwhelming for Johnson to continue. After Petty Enterprises, whose tragic decline is all too well known, Junior Johnson and Associates is the second winningest team in NASCAR history to close their doors. Fast forward 2 decades and you find ourselves at a very different race team, Michael Waltrip Racing. The rise of Michael Waltrip Racing may have been one of the most unanticipated developments in recent NASCAR history. This team was awful when they first showed up in the mid-2000s. Pretty much all this team was known for in their first few seasons was Michael Waltrip failing to qualify for nearly half the races in 2007, rocket fuel being found in their cars prior to the Daytona 500, and Michael McDowell doing his best crash test dummy impression for the COT in 2008. If it weren't for Toyota lining their pockets and the funding of various big-time sponsors like Domino's Pizza, Napa, Aaron's, and Burger King, this team would have certainly shut down within only a couple of seasons. But from 2009 to 2011, the team quietly built themselves up. And finally, in 2012, the team hit its peak. Clint Bowyer took over the team's 3rd entry, scored 3 wins, and walked away 2nd in the year's final point standings. By far the best season of his career. The duo of Brian Vickers and Mark Martin took over the Aaron's Dream Machine that season, and despite the split schedule, the car still finished an impressive 15th in the owner's standings, with the 2 drivers combining for 7 top 5 finishes. Heck, Mikey even got back behind the wheel and scored a top 10 at Daytona that summer, and he was only 1 turn away from a massive upset victory at Talladega before he got smoked along with the rest of the field. And although much of 2013 was looking like more of the same success, much like with Junior Johnson, all it took was one fateful race to derail the team forever. You already know it, Richmond 2013, more commonly referred to as Spingate. In an effort to get both full-time cars into the chase, Clint Bowyer was ordered to deliberately spin out with 7 laps to go, earning Martin Truex the all-important point he needed. Or so we thought, as less than a week later, NASCAR handed down a record-breaking $300,000 penalty to Michael Waltrip Racing for their devious plot. and retroactively removed Martin Truex from championship contention. This massive penalty directly resulted in Waltrip's longtime sponsor Napa leaving the team at season's end, leaving Martin Truex without a ride. With no new sponsors wanting to sign on to the tainted race team, MWR was forced to close up shop just a few years later in 2015, prematurely ending the rise of NASCAR's unlikeliest championship contenders. Well, maybe not the unlikeliest. That title likely belongs to Furniture Row Racing, and unlike MWR, they actually pulled it off. From start and parking to eventual Cup Series champions, nobody would have anticipated this small team based in Denver, Colorado to become the powerhouse it did. After years of steady building, the aforementioned Martin Truex Jr. combined with crew chief Cole Pearn would finally give the team the big break they were looking for. In only their second year together, Truex would get the team all the way to the championship 4. In 2016, they would switch to Toyota and form a technical alliance with Joe Gibbs Racing. This provided the team with the consistent speed they were looking for, but at a great cost. As only 2 years later, right after their unlikely Cup Series championship, the team announced that they would be shuttering at the end of 2018. Part of this was due to their sponsor 5 Hour Energy leaving NASCAR altogether, but Joe Gibbs also wasn't willing to continue their technical alliance unless team owner Barney Visser could cop up more than he could afford to pay. According to sources, Gibbs wanted to charge a 300% increase, and with Visser's health problems on top of this, staying in racing simply wasn't feasible. It's also widely believed that Gibbs was upset that they were getting spanked in 2017, and tensions between the teams after Martin and Kyle Busch took each other out of the Brickyard only made matters worse. It seems like a believable story, but we do have to take it with a grain of salt. And this all brings us to NASCAR's latest titan to fall, Stewart-Haas Racing. This one seems the most unbelievable. This isn't a single car team with an unlikely rise against the odds to become relevant for a few short years. This is one of NASCAR's modern day giants, owned by a Hall of Fame driver, top 10 in all-time race team wins, and one of only 3 teams to own 4 charters. The absolute demise of Stewart-Haas Racing needs to be studied by historians for decades to come. But unlike these other teams whose fall can be traced to 1 or 2 key moments, there are many moments that led to this. I actually made an entire video on Tony Stewart and his many gripes with NASCAR earlier this year. But for a quick summary, yeah, Tony Stewart nor Gene Haas has had much interest in NASCAR for the better part of the last 3 years. Tony's been burnt by this industry too many times in the last few years to count, plus he's pretty much living the drag racing life these days. And if Gene Haas is gonna get his butt kicked, he'd rather get it kicked in F1 than NASCAR. But I think Stewart-Haas could have survived even with owners who were barely interested in the sport. They had enough funding. Well, the key word is had. Fittingly enough, one of the nails in the coffin may be the exact same as Junior Johnson and Associates, the departure of Anheuser-Busch, who was certainly the team's largest cash cow. But they aren't the only major sponsor to depart. Smithfield, who was basically single-handedly funding Eric Almirola's ride, is no longer there. But beyond that, Go Bowling, Hunt Brothers Pizza, Magical Vacation Planners, Pristine Auction, and Ream have all left the team in less than 1 year. That's 8 major sponsors lost. Even Mobil 1, although they're still affiliated with the team, they've been on the car way less than years past, opting instead to invest in rising Toyota teams. There are 4 full-time Cup entries here, barely being supported at all. On top of that, the team's relationship with Ford has noticeably soured. It's long been rumored that Ford has demoted Stewart-Haas to a second-tier team and was offering less technical and financial support than in years past. And Tony Stewart had been rumored to be looking to switch manufacturers for the better part of the last 3 years after he publicly blamed them for not being able to sign Kyle Larson. And perhaps the uncertainty of the looming NASCAR charter deal is what ultimately tempted Tony and Gene to sell. As it stands, there's still no agreement between NASCAR and the teams beyond this season. So perhaps their thought process was just to get out while the getting's good. Under normal circumstances, Stewart-Haas likely would have persevered. But these circumstances were anything but normal. All the team's issues compounded on top of one another at maybe the worst possible time to be a team owner. Point is, there is no single moment in time that led to this happening. This has been 3 years worth of monumental struggles and maybe the most turbulent time in modern NASCAR history. It takes a lot to topple an empire this big, but this was the storm to do it. So that's a look at 4 championship caliber organizations that have either closed or will be closing in the near future. Which one do you think was the most sad? Leave a comment down below. But don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and check out dailydownforce.com for more awesome NASCAR content.